What's up? Welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here, another podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? A few topics this week, not too many, but I think a lot of really important things to discuss. Of course, Transformers Rise of the Beast, the latest Transformers film, talking about that. Past Lives, the new A24 drama film. Spoiler alert, my favorite movie of 2023 thus far, a must-watch. Can't wait to get into that. Also, Dave and Central Cee, two of my favorite rappers, made a surprise collab EP, Split Decision. That was fire. Gotta talk about that. And also, Janelle Monáe dropped fourth album, The Age of Pleasure. Janelle Monáe's last album from 2018, Dirty Computer, one of my favorite albums of that year. Really exciting that we're getting a new Janelle album after such a long time. So I think a bunch of important stuff to talk about. Make sure you follow the pod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Check the link below in the description. Get the pod however you can. Just make sure you get it. Check the link below for the best of 2023 Spotify playlist for my favorite songs of the year, updated weekly. Let me know what's good, and let's get into it. What's up, my nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Dave and Central Cee's collab EP, Split Decision, surprise EP that we just got, 4 tracks following lead single Sprinter from the week before. Man, this was fire, and I think this is just so awesome that this came out. You have arguably the best rapper in the UK right now in Dave, linking up with the hottest rapper in the UK right now in Central Cee. It's just a awesome mix, match made in heaven, and it's also really good. I think it goes without saying that being able to hang bar for bar with a rapper of Dave's caliber is no small feat, but Central Cee really hangs, and I think this is just a really awesome 4-track EP. I love that this exists. I'm so excited about it. It's the first new music from Dave since Starlight, loose single, came out last year. Obviously, Central Cee has been a bit more prolific recently, coming off the blistering success of Doja at the end of 2022, and Central Cee notably being really the first in long-ass time, first in recent memory, UK rapper to cross over in a real mainstream way in the United States. And you're seeing the numbers with Sprinter right now. Also going, awesome sign for Dave, who has not quite had that crossover appeal yet. Obviously, these guys are both kings in the UK already, and that's evidenced by Sprinter breaking the Spotify UK single-day streams record when this song came out back on June 2nd. These guys are, I think, really at the absolute top, and in the case of UK rap, being at the top of the rap game often means you're also at the top of the music game, period. Like, these are straight up pop stars in the UK at this rate. And also, unsurprisingly, Dave, the multi-talented guy that he is, co-produces or produces 3 of the 4 tracks as well. And I think, these just go really hard. Let's start with Sprinter, which was the lead single, has the music video out now. If that was all we got, I still would have been so happy because it just goes so damn hard, And that's really what this EP is all about. It's Dave and Centch just flexing because they've earned it. They've backed it up for years at this point. Obviously, Dave a bit longer than Central Cee, despite the fact that they're actually the same exact age. This EP dropped on Dave's birthday and a day after Centch's birthday. They're both 25 now. Despite all that, Dave has obviously been much more prolific for quite a long time, but they're really peers. And yeah, it's just, if we had just gotten Sprinter, I would have been happy because it's just a legendary collab. You don't get shit like this all that often, but when you do, I think stuff's really memorable. Like when you get those really memorable collabs with UK artists. I think about Heady One getting AJ Tracy and Stormzy on Ain't It Different, or whenever Skepta collabs with anyone. These are big moments, and I think someone who's relatively new and being at the top anyway, like Central Cee, it goes a long way. Think of Tion Wayne and Artie on Body. It's I feel like just collabs go such a long way over in the UK, and to get something like this, I'm just so excited. Sprinter, as I said, goes really hard. I think I just love it. Throughout this whole EP, a lot of great quotables. Dave is someone who you really can stick you with those puns, but I think Central Cee is Penn's a bit underrated still. Like he can really spit in, I think, really fun, amusing ways. I think both of them can like kind of stick funny humor in how they go about stuff. And even though they're flexing and just doing the braggadocious stuff, you know, over UK drill beats and a little bit of grime, like man, it just comes across as so fun. I love Sench on Sprinter early on. We ain't got generational wealth. It's only a year that I've had these millions. Love that one. Dave though, like sometimes he's hit you with these subtle like shots. Spend like I don't even like my stack. Just hard as fuck. I love towards the end of Sprinter. You have the Maybach music drop. Literally the Rick Ross Maybach music drop after they say Maybach music. Amazing callback. Goes hard. Then Dave with like the biggest diss ever. Heard that girl is a gold digger can't be true if she dated you. I mean, say less. Just again goes so hard. Like kind of like a banjo theme too. It's a bit understated, and just the verses from Sench and Dave just go really hard. I love Sprinter. One of my favorite songs of the year thus far. I think the first song on the EP, Trojan Horse, is probably the weakest. Not necessarily I disliked it, just I think it's the least memorable. Track 3, Our 25th Birthday, a bit slower song, a bit more piano, but still giving you like the bars. They don't cheapen out there. Dave kind of ballsily gives you a Jonathan Majors reference, name drop, given what Majors is going through in his personal life right now. Ballsy move to say the least. But like I think one of Dave's best lines on the whole EP is on our 25th birthday. I ain't go off a woman addiction. I got body dysmorphia, a figure addiction. I mean, geez, the way to say that you like women, like it's just so intricate, It's really great. Then UK Rap, the last track, I mean, just a banger, absolute banger, but like has one of those sticky ass, choruses, sticky hooks. Like, think about Central Cee's rise thus far. A lot of it's been with quotables and sticky hooks, whether it's stuff on commitment issues or loading, or of course Doja. Like sticky little lines and references are what his star has been built on. And I think with UK Rap, I don't know if this is going to be the stickiest song in the United States, but in the UK, she she don't listen to UK Rap if it's not Dave or Sench. Like that's going to play in clubs for months. Like that's hard as hell. And I really love his Sench's line at the end of his verse. She only listened to Rap Caviar. She in her car playing hella Americans. So funny. Yeah. So I think for a brief EP, from the maximum star power you can get right now, like it's like a kind of dream from UK hip hop standpoint. And the fact that on this day we also got a J Hus single featuring Drake after the backstory that Drake and J Hus have back when Drake brought him out after he got out of prison. Like really great time to be UK rap fan. So hopefully we get something more from Central Cee soon, like of another full length, I think, because like we haven't had a full length project from Central Cee since before Doja came out, obviously in the beginning of 2022 when he dropped his second tape. So be looking out for something from Central Cee soon. I don't know about Dave, like takes more time as a true album artist. So I think the fact that we even got Split Decision is probably as good as we're gonna get, But we'll wait and be patient, of course, because he's obviously worth the wait. Big fan of these artists. I saw them both on tour within the last year. This is really just such a treat. But let me know, how did you feel about Split Decision? Did it just completely wow you the way it wowed me as a big fan of both artists? And for more rap reviews, more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Janelle Monáe's fourth album, The Age of Pleasure. Yes, Janelle, back. First album since 2018. Yes, Dirty Computer was already 5 years ago. And it's been a long wait because Dirty Computer is an amazing album. It was my number 2 album of 2018. In retrospect, probably my number 1 album of 2018, to be honest. Reviewed it on the pod back in the day. Check that out. And yeah, Janelle's been busy, acting, doing all kinds of stuff. We just saw Janelle in Glass Onion last year, where Janelle was great at, in a kind of a dual role. Spoilers for Glass Onion. But Janelle Monáe, at the end of the day, has always been a musician first, and a multi-talented musician at that one. Again, jump genres, introduce, more throwback sounds, bringing in lots of funk and soul into more traditional like pop and hip hop music. It's always been a really fun medley. And of course, Janelle Monáe is also known for these big, grand concept albums, of course, playing an alter ego often on her music with the Cindy Mayweather persona that has been put on for some time. And, in the runtime since we got that first Janelle Monáe album back in 2010, I think the peeling off of the layers has continued as these Janelle statements, these Janelle musical ambitions have, I think, been more, I don't want to say simplified, but I think the need to hide behind like dense storytelling and layered metaphor regarding, I think, a pretty common uh, thematic through line through the Janelle Monáe music, which would be, of course, queer expression, black identity, independence, shrouding all that in like these like kind of like science fiction storytelling hasn't been as necessary as Janelle Monáe has come into their own publicly, more proudly, more independently in the more recent times. And I think just kind of laying it out there more explicitly from a lyrical sense kind of makes sense. Now, as a result of that, The Age of Pleasure, album 4, it's 14 tracks, but it's only 32 minutes. Those first two albums are super long. As I said, these grand concept albums. This is just definitely a different take from Janelle Monáe. And despite all that, of course, there's a lot of hype because I was far from the only one who really loved Dirty Computer. And while I like the album, I think there's some good songs on here for sure. And I think, sonically it flows really nicely. I don't think the short runtime does it a lot of favors, at least for me, because it's hard not to immediately reflect upon like what I'm not hearing in The Age of Pleasure. And I just kind of think back on like some of the bigger, grander songs that were on Dirty Computer, for example. Songs like, Make Me Feel or Screwed, Pink even. Like there's just some like big, really like showy songs. I like that as well. And I think there's a few of those on The Age of Pleasure, but not to that degree. There's nothing quite as like pop maximalist in a really fun, jubilant way as like Screwed, or as hard from a hip hop standpoint as Django Jane. And that's okay. I think Janelle has clearly wanted to make something that's lighter and funner, but it's almost like a follow up to those first three albums from a messaging standpoint. Like this is like the loose record. This is the fun album. This is the horny record. Oh my God, this is so explicit, which is both hilarious and awesome that Janelle is just kind of laying it out there. Of course, this album cycle kind of started in earnest where Janelle Monáe with her their promo photos and whatnot showing a lot of skin, let's say, which has not been, of course, the trademark in the past when it comes to Janelle's personal fashion styles. And that got a lot of attention on social media. Good marketing, I guess we could say. But it really does fit the album. Look at the album cover, again, showing a lot of skin. It fits the album, this kind of looseness, this carefreeness. And I guess it makes sense as, the first post-pandemic album from Janelle Monáe, that this would perhaps be that sentiment, So in a sense, I'm a bit like, I don't want to say let down, but I'm a bit like disappointed that it's not quite as grand as her past work. But that's not really a fair comp, of course. It's just what I have, like, in the back of my mind. But if you listen to it, these 14 songs, there's a lot of interludes as well. So it's not really 14 tracks. It's pretty brief. And, I think, of course, it always sounds really great. Like we just kind of go through the track list here, on Float, track 1, which was the lead single, there's these really awesome horns that sound awesome, really awesome and big and loud. I love it. Champagne Shit, track 2, the horns are still there. It's very funky sound. The drums really kicking in. Going through, I think like the horn production, the funk production is probably the most consistent thing you get here. Like No Better, the horns are really great on that one as well. But again, like nothing's ever like super big. I think it's more about like cohesion and like sequencing, because this album will like sneak up on you in terms of like, oh, that's an interlude. Like, for example, what was it? Black Sugar Beach, track 3. It's the first interlude. it really just comes across as an outro of Champagne Shit. And the mixing is so good, I didn't even realize it was a new track in the track listing. It just sounded like it was part of Champagne Shit, but no, it's actually its own thing. Eventually, you get these other interludes like Hot and Ooh La La with Grace Jones and The French 75 featuring Sister Nancy. And that's all fine and good, but like it feels a bit slight to me. I think my favorite songs on this would be the second single, Lipstick Lover, just really catchy. Probably the closest thing Janelle has on this album to like a really poppy track. That one's really fun. The Rush, I think, is quite good, featuring Nia Long and Amari. That is like really sexy, really explicit. That one's really fun. Water Slide, that's probably my favorite song. It's a very thinly veiled metaphor about being wet below the belt, let's say. Uh, so from the horny standpoint, it's fitting that bill, but I think it's just actually like really awesome from a vocal standpoint. I love the way it ends. The only song that I thought didn't really work for me was Phenomenal with Doechii. I'm a Doechii fan for sure, and Doechii has had a recent hit with What It Is. Doechii's a very talented artist. Really excited for like a big full length from her, but I don't know. It kind of felt like a song that was like a few different parts, doesn't quite fit together for me. I don't think Janelle necessarily impresses on that song either. So that's the only real miss for me. I think Champagne Shit's very, very fun as well. Just the flexing from a lyrical standpoint from Janelle, quite enjoyable. But again, it's not quite as like hard as Django Jane is on Dirty Computer, as I said. But that one's a fun song as a looser one. Honestly, Float, like, I think the Float verses are good, but the hook, like, very repetitive, and I think kind of weakly written for, Janelle's standards, that's for sure. Does have a really fun quotable from Janelle, though. Of course, they said I was bi. Yeah, baby, I'm by a whole nother coast. Love it. Janelle's always been happy to poke fun at people questioning her sexual orientation and her relationships and things, even if she's been a bit more open about those things publicly. It's always fun when it finds its way back into the music. Yeah, I think ultimately, like, there's nothing quite as sticky from like a single standpoint from Dirty Computer as I've been saying, but still sounds really good. It's definitely very easy to put on and fits that summery vibe. So, I think we'll really try to push this for top Grammys. I don't think it's really a contender to win at this stage. Obviously, we know Taylor Swift and Midnight's is going to dominate the album of the year discussion given the year Taylor's having. But I think Janelle Monáe, the Celebration has not quite gotten to the mainstream level yet, and perhaps the next album might be that time for like the Janelle coronation. As people have seen her in more movies, there's been even more albums out, but we'll see on that. But yeah, I think for an album that's, I think, pretty clearly my least favorite of the four that Janelle Monáe has put out, it's still quite good and better than most people's, music that they put out. And that just speaks to, I think, how talented Janelle Monáe is and also how high the standard is, So even if it's not quite hitting the absolute pinnacle that the artist has previously hit in the past, that doesn't mean there's not some merit to it. And like the production, the sequencing, the instrumentation on this, there's enough going on that warrants multiple listens, of course. So, yeah, Janelle Monáe, let me know, how did you feel about The Age of Pleasure? Did you like it more than some of her past albums? I liked it less. How did you feel about it? And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Transformers Rise of the Beasts, the 7th live-action Transformers film. First since Bumblebee in 2018. Second, not directed by Michael Bay. And yeah, I think this was an interesting moment for a Transformers movie to come out with this franchise. Notably, Bumblebee, coming out several years ago at this point, was a step in a new direction for the Transformers franchise. Smaller stakes story, more grounded, more human-centric regarding Haley Steinfeld's character, smaller budget when it comes to the production of the movie. And that's a film that, although it grossed less than the Bay movies, it actually was a financial success because it cost less as well. That being said, they quickly announced that they were going to make a bigger Transformers movie once again, and quickly we learned that it was going to be a Beast Wars adaptation. Beast Wars, of course, the kind of cult hit animated Transformers series from the 90s, and an injection of, I think, life into this franchise that has, I think, felt long in the tooth to many towards the end of the Bay run. I liked Bumblebee a lot. I thought it was honestly like pretty solid, like genre storytelling, and like perhaps like the highs you can achieve with like dramatic stakes when it comes to a movie about, transforming alien robots, after all. Now, I don't have any like affinity for Beast Wars. A lot of people do. In general, I don't have like a huge affinity for Transformers. I enjoyed the films growing up as a kid. Like me and my brother, enjoyed them when they came out. But I don't think about the franchise like all that much. But obviously, I was happy to see Rise of the Beast, check it out, see what it's like. And I would say, kind of unsurprisingly, it's not the best Transformers movie, and it's not the worst one. It's solid. There's things I liked and things I didn't like about it. Let's just get into that. So this is directed by Stephen Caple Jr., who did Creed 2. And I think something that stands out quite quickly is that you did a big, large-scale Transformers movie again, but you didn't do it with Michael Bay. Now that means there's some things that are good, right? I think the plot makes a bit more sense. Not that it makes a lot of sense, but it makes more sense than some of the Bay stuff. There's less leering female camera work, gratuitous shots of the female anatomy that we expected from Michael Bay back then, of course. But one thing you can always count on with Michael Bay is that man knows how to shoot action. Watch Ambulance last year. Amazing action movie because of Bay's camera work, really. And I think just the action, the watching the Transformers do their thing, which is really the main attraction when you make the big scale Transformers movies, it's just not quite as compelling as it is under Caple's eye than it was with Bay. That's probably to be expected, but I think of probably like the peak of like Transformers action to me would be in Revenge of the Fallen, which is not a good film overall, but like that forest fight scene where Megatron and the Decepticons kill Optimus Prime, that was like some badass shit and it looked really cool. And, contrast that with like the end of Rise of the Beasts. It's like super gray. You get the gray bad guys, gray bad Transformers on this gray field. It's all grayscale. This doesn't engage you. I think one thing that's nice this time around is that like the character designs make the Transformers stand out a bit more. I think that was a big criticism of the Bay films, is that a lot of the Decepticons looked very similar. They're often quite silvery, and it's hard to tell who was who unless they had something obvious that differentiated them, like Starscream looking like a triangle or Megatron being Megatron. Like otherwise, it's kind of generic. And I think a lot of the characters are less generic looking this time around, but the bad guys, like the cannon fodder, don't alleviate that problem. And that was a big sigh I had in the third act, which is like watching, yep, here comes the big, onslaught of never-ending anonymous bad guys to slaughter. And it's like, doesn't really compel you too much. Now, I think what Rise of the Beast obviously tries to give you a different dynamic with the Maximals. And Optimus Primal, the gorilla Transformer, voiced by Ron Perlman. The leader, Michelle Yeoh as the voice of a Falcon Transformer. And they're supposed to be like a different dynamic. And we don't really get enough time with the Maximals to have like a big impression from them, get a big impression from them. And I'd also say like this is like a weak Optimus Prime movie, if such a thing exists. Like, I love Peter Cullen's voice work throughout the franchise. He Optimus sounds cool and badass, but like Optimus Prime in Rise of the Beast is kind of a wet blanket as a character. He already was kind of a generic action figure type character anyway. There wasn't a whole lot under the hood with Optimus Prime, but he felt particularly like I don't know, kind of dull this time around. I wasn't super invested with him. Honestly, I think the best aspect of like the Transformers side of things, where I thought Michelle Yeoh was like pretty solid for what she was given to do. But my favorite thing about this was honestly the main villain, which would be Scourge, voiced by Peter Dinklage, who's the leader of the Terracons who are serving Unicron. He has Unicron as like front and center in this movie. I think Rise of the Beasts, to its credit, takes like the Transformers lore, which is so ridiculous and so absurd. It takes it seriously and just goes in and, if you want to see a faithful adaptation of this bonkers ass storytelling that is Transformers, this is what you're gonna get. And part of that is Unicron, this gargantuan planet swallowing Galactus-esque villain, voiced by Coleman Domingo this time around. And Scourge as his like liaison on the ground, actually pretty badass. He has a cool look to him with like the devil mask he's got. Pretty badass when he kills one of the Maximals in the prologue. Yeah, I thought he was pretty fun. And of course, the other interface with this would be the human characters. Notably, it's like pretty svelte, pretty slight. But you have Anthony Ramos' character and Dominique Fishback's character, both grounded in, based in New York City. Fishback plays a museum, like archaeology intern, and Ramos plays a like computer whiz trying to get a job to support his family. He has a sick younger brother, hardworking single mom, it seems. And I think they both give pretty good performances. Honestly, like awesome look for Dominique Fishback, who is amazing in The Deuce, amazing in Judas and the Black Messiah. Got a lot of love for Swarm on Amazon earlier this year. Great look for her. I think she deserves it. And she does a pretty good job for what she's, given to do. And Ramos has, I think, genuine star power. People know him, Hamilton, In the Heights. He's got a lot of stuff coming up. I like Anthony Ramos a lot. I think he's just really charismatic. They both struggle to act with the Transformers characters they interact with, but it's no surprise. It's, complete green screen work. Like, it's challenging. I don't know how much better you can do with that, but I think because like both those characters are given like somewhat of like a human like connection to like their own lives, with like Ramos's character's family in the very beginning, like they do feel like real characters, and like they do drive a lot of the plot, which I liked. Like it felt like slightly more grounded for a Transformers movie that was still pretty big, and I think if the third act, I think, just looked a little better, like the action like really delivered at the end, I think this would have been towards the top of my Transformers rankings, if you will. I just think like it never really had like a standout like wow moment, nor did it have anything that like was like a god awful moment either. It's like just a kind of a solid Transformers movie. I think if we could have punched this action up a little bit more, it would have been cool. I think the CGI itself, like I mentioned the grayscale stuff, but the CGI itself is pretty good. And like obviously you need to spend a lot to make it look pretty good. Obviously this is CGI heavy. People know. Yeah. So like overall, it's a solid film as far as the Transformers standard goes. Albeit it's a low bar. I think people all know that at this point. But it kind of gives you what you want from it if that's what you're seeking. So, don't expect a reinvention. I think that's kind of obvious. Now, at the very end, spoilers, but like at the very end, there's kind of this outro scene, or actually, no, it's a mid-credit scene, like right after the credits start. And Ramos is actually going to get a job this time. And he encounters Michael Kelly. And I'm like, interesting. You have like a real, like legit actor in this like cameo role. What is it? Tellman, like you quickly learn that this like group, they understand what Ramos was up to, the Transformers. He denies it. Saving the world, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, it's just like a Sector 7 introduction. Because I should have mentioned, Rise of the Beast takes place in the early 90s. Bumblebee took place in the late 80s. They're both prequels to the other Transformers movies. And it's like, oh, is this like a Sector 7 nod? Shout out John Turturro. No, Michael Kelly actually is representative of, spoilers, G.I. Joe. Of course, G.I. Joe, like Transformers, a Hasbro franchise, they are setting up a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover in earnest, it seems. They had previously announced that, Paramount had previously announced that Rise of the Beast would be the first of, a new trilogy, or at least a set of 3 new movies about Transformers. And there's animated series in development as well. Now, if we think about G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes, I actually thought was, not half bad, but really bombed at the end of 2021. Shout out Henry Golding. G.I. Joe franchise seems pretty inert these days. Transformers, which has always been a bigger success at the box office from its heyday even to now, perhaps it's a way to resurrect G.I. Joe in a certain sense for Hasbro, for E1, for Paramount. These rights are actually being sold in a certain sense right now. So more to come here, but kind of interesting. I honestly didn't expect it. Doesn't necessarily get me super excited. Like I think like GI Joe is what it is at this point, but could be kind of cool and maybe actually ambitious. We'll see. Also, because this movie Rise of the Beast was set in the '90s, unexpectedly awesome soundtrack just because it's set in New York. Unsurprisingly, very '90s hip hop heavy, and like they could actually get really good needle drops. You get Rakim and Wu Tang and Biggie. Like they play some classics, which I appreciated. But yeah, that's Rise of the Beasts. I think it's the box office will be very interesting to analyze as well. It's actually looking like it'll be a decent start the opening weekend domestically, decent start in China, but I have a hard time not seeing Rise of the Beast kind of getting swallowed up by Across the Spider-Verse and being one of the films that gets kind of beaten down in a stacked, release calendar. Little Mermaid's doing pretty strong in the U.S. and Guardians still kicking there. Kind of reminds me of how Dungeons and Dragons kind of got swallowed up in the really busy March. We'll see, because I think they would like this movie to do pretty decent given the franchise plans they have, but they are expensive. So if it doesn't do much better than Bumblebee, then you can probably kiss the crossover universe goodbye. But it's tracking pretty well so far, so we'll see how it holds as the summer continues. So that's something to watch. But let me know, how did you like Transformers Rise of the Beast? Were you like a hardcore Transformers head? I am not, but like, were you really excited to see the Beast Wars stuff? If so, let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Past Lives, the new drama film from Celine Song, her directorial debut from A24, starring Greta Lee. This is the best movie of 2023 thus far. I absolutely loved this movie. It incredibly moved me in ways I didn't expect, and it's definitely my favorite movie of the year thus far. I'm going to get into all of those reasons why, including spoilers, but I'll just start at the beginning here. But yeah, amazing film, a must-watch movie. This came out in a limited release 2 weeks ago, New York, LA. Got a brief expansion last week, and I was able to see it. It'll go nationwide in a few weeks, June 23rd. So it's coming. Everyone will be able to see this soon, but it's really great. This premiered back at Sundance, but now it's got the A24 push behind it. I think this is the first real official like Oscar contender movie that's come out, especially on the original screenplay front, the Best Actress front for Greta Lee. Other awards bodies, Best First Feature Film from Celine Song, the Korean-Canadian playwright. This is her first film. So impressive. I think so incredibly affecting and moving. It's a movie that doesn't steep itself in cliche or predictability at all and absolutely nails its ending. But I think it's a really captivating movie for something that's as dramatic as it is. Now, this is a movie about Nora, a young woman in Seoul who is emigrating, or her family is immigrating from Seoul to Canada and then to the United States. And in the process, Nora is going to leave behind her, childhood friend, Haesung. They're both like about 12 years old at the time. They seem to have a real kinetic kinship, platonic, but perhaps suggesting of future romance down the line once they both mature. One of those like really close connections that sometimes you do find in young people. And this movie, having that premise of right there, I think is a really strong hook, because then the structure of this film really jumps in and grabs you, because we very quickly jump ahead 12 years. Now we're with young Nora in her 20s, played by Greta Lee now, moving to New York City to pursue a writing career, as a playwright. And this is a bit autobiographical from Celine's song as well, so you can kind of feel the connection there. Real life playwright makes a movie about a playwright. There we go. But Nora, of course, is her given English name, accepted English name that she picks. Nora, really wants to make something of her life in New York after her family has, immigrated twice to find a new life, leaving Korea behind. And kind of by chance, Nora looks up Haesung. Kind of like the memory of Haesung when they were kids kind of pops back up in her mind when talking to her mother, and she looks him up on Facebook. Funny enough, this is like set in like 2012, so it's like Facebook 1.0, the very original, basic, streamlined version of Facebook. Looks him up, connects with Haesung, and actually does a Skype call. Again, shout out 2012, and they connect for the first time in 12 years. Haesung is still in Korea, and Nora has pursued a completely new life without him. And they start, catching up and I guess reacquainting themselves with each other over Skype, with that massive time difference and whatnot. And then, Nora makes I think, a very clear decision, very important part of the movie, where Nora decides to kind of cut off their Skyping, their Skype calls, their regular correspondence, getting to know each other again, because Nora really wants to make something of her life in New York first. She doesn't feel like she's accomplished anything yet, and she wants to do that first, and says that they can like reconnect down the line. And it's like really, I think, a really tough tough moment for Haesung, because we spend some moments with Haesung with his buddies back in Seoul, like spending time at the dinner table, drinking soju and stuff, kind of talking. You can tell that Haesung had this feeling of longing, this feeling of missed opportunity, missed chance with Nora, even though that was a connection from when they were very young. And it's almost a bit naive to think that way, but his friends kind of encourage him in a certain sense, and he's incredibly disappointed when Nora wants to cut it off. And again, this is just Skype calling, right? And I think at this point, this movie, that structure, I think, is really, really engaging. Because we quickly transition to Nora going on a writer's retreat over in Montauk, in Long Island, and there she meets a fellow artist, a writer, like a novelist, Arthur, played by John Magaro, and they hit it off at the retreat, and then we have another 12-minute flash forward, moving into the the third act of the film, basically. And next thing we know, they're now like 36 or so, in their mid 30s, 12 years in the future. And they got married. Arthur and Nora are married, and it's like, oh my god, it's like you think this is a movie that's setting up this like will they or won't they, lost in translation type storytelling, and it still might get there, but to throw a big wrench in like the Nora getting married, to a white American as well, really kind of committing to that life. And at this stage, Act 3, I think, really kicks into high gear, and everything really kind of comes through with a key decision. But like, there's this, I think, really strong thematic thing presented at that Raiders retreat when Arthur and Nora connect, and that is Nora bringing up the Korean concept of inyon, which is broadly, forgive me, but like broadly, just like a concept of past lives. Again, the name of this movie, past lives, that like you perhaps meet someone in a previous life, and then your interaction, your relationship with them can progress or change or grow in a future life. Basically, is that concept. And Nora kind of brings it up as a joke to Arthur, because she says, "Oh, it's just how Koreans use inyon as a way to seduce people," and like she does that, and she gives this kind of like subtle mannerism, as like telling Arthur it's okay for you to kiss me now, And then we quickly flash forward 12 years, they got married, and inyon will come back up at the end of the movie, but I think that was like a really funny moment. There is some brief moments of subtle humor, often with Arthur involved, that I think go a really long way. But Greta Lee, to this point, is giving, I think, a really incredible performance, because it's often subtle, it's often mannerisms with the face, whether it's her side profile or something like gesturing. I was quite impressed, especially because my main interaction with Greta Lee, who's been very active as an actress, mainly as a comedy actress. Think of her in Russian Doll in a supporting role, for example. She's a funny person. John Magaro, my gosh, he is really quickly rising up the rankings of some of the best actors we have right now. Think of his roles in First Cow and Showing Up earlier this year. Definitely an A24 favorite at this point. And he gives a really great performance as Arthur. And, you know, I think Act 3 is really where the action, if you want to call it that, happens in Past Lives, because we jump ahead 10, 12 years again. Arthur and Nora are happily married. They're very successful in their artistic careers as well, living in the East Village in New York. And they, Nora connects with Hae-sung again after 12 years of them not talking at all once they stopped Skyping. And Hae-sung actually decides to come to New York from Seoul, visit New York. And it's not positioned or like brought up to Nora as he's visiting New York to meet her. But once they do reconnect in person for the first time in 24 years, and I believe it was Central Park, Nora quickly realizes that he actually did come to see her again. And from this point out, I think the chemistry between Greta Lee as Nora and Tae Yu as Hae-sung is absolutely palpable. And at this point, watching the movie, you are absolutely wrapped and on the edge of your seat because you don't know what's going to happen. Because again, this movie has not steered into cliche at any point, so you haven't really had a feel for like what's going to happen. And I think it's also an amazing movie because this ending is so, I think, rich to discuss with other people who have seen the movie, because I mean, something wild really happens. Nora, after spending like a whole day with Hae-sung, they go see the Statue of Liberty. They spend time together, talking to each other and stuff. Nora brings Hae-sung to her home and introduces him to Arthur. And Arthur speaks just a faint amount of Korean. Hae-sung speaks just a faint amount of English. They don't really have the ability to communicate all that well. And from there, they go out to a bar together. And it's one of these, I think, just an amazing sequence where you have Nora in between them sitting at a bar, this kind of wide shot, and they're talking, and Nora's kind of like doing some translation between the two. But then, Hae-sung and Nora have this conversation together at the bar, and they kind of isolate Arthur, and Arthur can't really keep up with the conversation. They're not bringing him in as much anymore, and you can tell it's bothering Arthur. And even before this, you could tell that Arthur was, kind of really struggling with like the idea of, the past spurned potential lover of his wife's deep past has come back into her life, and does he feel threatened? But he doesn't want to be overly controlling of his wife. I think it's a really crazy situation to put yourself in, and John Magaro just really, I think, is able to demonstrate how like you would be going through it in your mind in that situation, and you can tell that he's getting a bit just upset. Not that he's lashing out or anything, but you can tell he's having a hard time basically sitting next to this like incredible chemistry, And I think before this, before Hae-sung is brought to the bar like the night before, when Nora explains like the day they had together when she was catching up with him, Arthur and Nora have this, I think, really astute conversation like in bed, just talking to each other, where they kind of speak about how they came together. And I think a big part of that was they both were going to be in New York City, both had artistic ambitions. Them getting married faster than planned helped Nora with getting her green card. Some conveniences with how they got together, right? And it's, in spite of all that, of course, they're happy. They do love each other. They have a great life together, and yet you can tell that like as it's being positioned when they're talking to each other at the bar, like Nora has this feeling of like, what could have been. Not even so much the one that got away, but just like, is this the life I was supposed to have lived? And that's what's, I think, so amazing about Past Lives, is that it's so interesting, I think, and more like a philosophical, proposition about like the lives we all live and whether that's what we are like really supposed to do in life. And you can break that down into like missed opportunity and like the one who got away. But I think, bringing in that premise of Inhyun, after uh, Nora and Haesung and Arthur leave the bar, um, Haesung calls an Uber from their place to go to the airport, I believe, to leave, or at least go to his hotel and then leave the next day. And Arthur stays on this in the apartment, and Nora walks into the Uber. And then we have this, like, I believe it's like 5-6 minute tracking shot, and it's a wide shot, a pan. They walked out of their brownstone, and Nora and Haesung walk from, as our viewer, they walk to our left towards on the sidewalk, almost like walking back into the past. Then they stand there on the curb, just kind of looking into each other's eyes. And at this point, as a viewer, you're on the edge of your seat because you've been so invested in these characters and this journey and these performances and this film kind of subverting expectations at all opportunity. You don't know what's going to happen, and you're incredibly moved. And they they embrace briefly, but really it's just a discussion of I think a really dynamite way to end the movie, where Haesung brings up the premise of past lives, and perhaps this very moment that they are sharing together, this is actually a past life, and that in the future they will perhaps be together, and then they leave, or Haesung leaves, gets in the car and leaves. Nora walks back to our right, back into the present time, back into the future, and Arthur's there on the stoop waiting for her, and then she just kind of like sobs in his arms, and the movie ends. And yeah, I think just the whole that idea at the very end of like this perhaps actually being a past life, and that maybe there is a chance that this life they could have had together might still actually happen in the future. I think it's just a really affecting, like, landing of the plane, if you will, especially after all that tension and palpable energy you had felt at the bar scene beforehand. And yeah, I mean, I was just really moved by it. I think it's a really impressive film. And like, I was actually kind of like overcome with emotion after watching the movie. Like, as I was walking out of the theater, I actually like kind of like welled up just thinking, not because I was like sad about the characters perhaps, but I don't know. I think it's this like very existential type story, and it just kind of makes you think about things, whether that's in your own life or just in general from a more generic standpoint. So yeah, I mean, I think just talk about like like multiple lives and destiny and fate, all these kind of weighty themes we think about all the time in storytelling. But this is, I think, one of the most sophisticated ways those type of concepts have been presented in a movie. And again, a big part of that is the acting, is this incredibly smart and layered screenplay, is the structure of that screenplay, as I said, just a dynamite ending. I think the Arthur performance from John Magaro, again, goes a long way with this film as well, because Arthur being able to communicate a lot about what that character is feeling in relationship to Nora without having lots of lines all the time in some of those scenes, again, speaks to Magaro's acting performance, but just goes a really long way. Obviously, it's a huge breakout performance from Greta Lee, who had a comedy background to this point. Like I said at the beginning, Best Actress worthy, without a doubt. That'll be a campaign that A24 pushes for without question. Yeah, I mean, I was like really, really blown away. I think it's a special film. It's a film worth discussing with people as well, for how you interpret things, and whether that's on a more superficial level, like is Nora actively settling by not running off with Haesung, versus sticking with Arthur, or just more of the existential stuff that's really stuck with me. I think Teo Yu does a really good job as Haesung, despite not being the real lead character. He has a strong presence to him, and I think he's also able to handle some of the emotional scenes as well. Really liked him. Notably, this movie was announced. Choi Woo-shik was actually supposed to play Haesung. That should be a name familiar to people who've seen Parasite or Train to Busan, but that ended up falling through. But I mean, I think the casting absolutely was dynamite throughout the film, and Yeah, I just absolutely loved it. My favorite movie of 2023 thus far. I think for a movie like this, some people might think, oh, does it manipulate you into feeling something? I did not feel manipulated at all. I thought it was incredibly genuine. The way it gets to the emotional beats it lands on, absolutely loved it. And I'm really hopeful that this movie can make some kind of impact at the box office. In this brief expansion this past weekend, it had a strong per theater average for sure, but we've seen that in the past recently, and hopefully this can be a more adult drama film that can find some kind of audience out there. A24 is doing a traditional platform release over a 4-week period. Hopefully that helps the old school way of building buzz, building word of mouth. And the word of mouth, of course, is through the roof with this movie. So I'm hoping the movie makes some kind of box office impact and really gets in front of people, because I think this is a movie that will really stick with people that watch it. It'll definitely stick with me. But let me know, how did you feel about Past Lives? Did you love it as much as I did? And for more movie reviews, of course, Oscar talk, when this movie comes back around for that later in the year, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, I'm going to talk about DC's latest blockbuster, The Flash, a film announced damn near a decade ago, finally in the ether for us to discuss. I'm traveling, so I'm not going to get to too much more for next week, but I'll be catching up on everything in the weeks to come. But talking The Flash next week, make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. Check the link below, get the pod, hit the playlist, check the link below. Let me know what's good, and I'll see you next week.